On behalf of the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California, it is my privilege to welcome Mr. Ratan Tata for a conversation. My name is Uday Kapoor, and I am a volunteer in the Oral Histories program at the museum, the world's leading institution in preserving and presenting the history of computing, semiconductor technology, entrepreneurship, and more recently, software. Mr. Ratan Tata was the chairman of Tata Sons, the holding company of the Tata Group, from 1991 till his retirement on December 28, 2012, his 75th birthday, when he was conferred the honorary title of Chairman Emeritus of Tata Sons, Tata Industries, Tata Motors, Tata Steel, and Tata Chemicals. During his tenure, the group's revenues grew manifold, totaling over $100 billion in 2011 to 2012. He has recently returned to his leadership role as chairman of Tata Sons temporarily. Mr. Tata serves on the board of directors of Alcoa and is also on the international advisory boards of Mitsubishi Corporation, JP Morgan Chase, Rolls-Royce, and the Monetary Authority of Singapore. He is the chairman of the Sir Ratan Tata Trust and Sir Dorabji Tata Trust, two of the largest private sector promoted philanthropic trusts in India. He is the chairman of the Council of Management of Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. He also serves on the board of trustees of Cornell University and the University of Southern California. The Government of India honored Mr. Tata with his second highest civilian award, the Padma Vibhushan, in 2008. He has been appointed Honorary Knight Grand Cross of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, Commander of the Legion of Honor by the Government of France, and Rockefeller Foundation has conferred him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Among his other achievements, Mr. Tata is also an Honorary Fellow of the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, the Royal Academy of Engineering, and a Foreign Associate of National Academy of Engineering. He has received honorary doctorates from numerous universities in India and abroad. So with that, we will start with Mr. Tata's early life. You were born in Surat, Gujarat, British India in 1937.
I was born in Bombay.
Oh, you were born in Bombay, so I had the wrong
My father was
information.
born in Surat.
I see. Thank you.
Okay.
So I stand corrected.
Okay.
So at this stage, I would like you to say a few words about your early life,
Okay.
and we can take it from there.
Okay. As you just indicated, I was born in Bombay and lived my early life in Bombay. When I was 7, my father and mother separated, which is not so common in those days.
Yes.
And both my brother and I were brought up by my grandmother, who played a very significant role in my early life. I continued to go to school in Bombay, and when I graduated from high school, I went to the US. And I was in the US for about 10 years. I went to Cornell, from where I graduated as an architect, and then moved to Los Angeles because I never got used to the cold weather. So moved to Los Angeles and worked there in an architect's office for about 3 years, and then came back to India because my grandmother was ill, and that changed my whole life.
Right. So I was going to come back to that. Your history starting from the college, we can come back to that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to spend a little more time on your childhood.
Okay.
As you mentioned, you were raised by your grandmother. What was your childhood like, and were there any mentors and special teachers that you remember?
As I mentioned, my grandmother was probably the most influential force that existed at that time. We lived in a big house which my grandfather built but never lived to see finished. He had a hobby of collecting art. The house was meant to be his private museum, but as he didn't finish it, most of his collections are in the Prince of Wales Museum in Bombay.
Right.
My grandmother was a very interesting person. She was Lady Ratan Tata.
Yes.
She was a very disciplined person, very intent on making sure that she lived a life with dignity, and she made my brother and me follow the same stringent codes, if you might.
I see.
We were often ashamed of some of the trippings that we had as the two sons of a very affluent family.
Yes.
And I remember, for example, when going to school in Bombay, my grandmother used to have a huge Rolls Royce, which is quite old at that time. And it would embarrass my brother and me to be seen in that, so we'd walk home and the car would follow us because it was so ostentatious. So we had many issues like that in my early days. They were very happy days because she was very understanding and yet very demanding. So we lived a life of luxury. We spent 3 or 4 months in the UK with her. She and her husband had a huge estate in Twickenham, outside London.
I see.
Which I have promised the county council, which now owns the place, to go and visit, but have not as yet done so.
I see.
So, to sum up, it was a very nice and reminiscent of good times, childhood that we had.
I see.
She was probably the most significant force at that time.
Right. So, in terms of, it is such a fantastic legacy of the Tatas. Were you exposed to the values of the Tatas in your early life?
I can't answer that consciously, but I'm sure we were exposed to it.
Right.
Because my father, my grandmother, and everybody lived by those standards. Right. But it was not consciously imposed on us. The legacy of being fair to all, tremendously strong legacy of equality among. We were never a family that shouted at our servants or treated them like dirt, or.
Right.
There was a great deal of equity in terms of how we treated them, and most of the people that worked for my grandmother and my father served them for 40 years or 50 years, as the case might be.
Right.
So I would imagine the underlying thing was never to do anything that would bring shame to the family.
Sure. So when were you exposed to, for example, the life of Jamshedji Tata. Do you remember when you learned about his contributions and his legacy?
My grandmother would have been the only person that, when we were young, who had met and lived in the presence of Jamshedji, because Sir Ratan was his younger son.
Yes.
So she, in her early days of marriage, they lived in a splendid house, which is Jamshedji's home.
Yes.
And she used to talk of Jamshedji at some length, but somewhat superficially. The only thing I remember was that she said you couldn't take your eyes away from his eyes.
I see.
She kept on saying that he had, penetrating eyes, and apart from that, she didn't talk very much. I suppose in those days, a young bride was a young bride.
Yes. Yes.
And
exactly.
not much interface.
Yes. Yes. So, in terms of, so that's a good segue into the legacy of the Tatas. I have read a lot about Jamshedji, and of course, throughout my life history, I've been aware of Jamshedji, and as you said, his visage, which is so impressive. He's considered the founder, of course, of the whole Tata vision and the whole industry, but also intertwined with the industrialization of India.
Yes.
Because of the way that he saw tomorrow and the way he set up the industries. So I wanted to talk to you about a little bit. He was born in Navsari in 1839 in southern Gujarat to a family of Parsi priests, and he moved to Bombay at the age 13. Can you tell me a little bit about your perspective on his contributions?
Well, from what I'm able to gather, and just a little aside, I lived 6 years in Jamshedpur,
Right.
which is very much Jamshedji's major creation, the Tata Steel.
Yes.
So much of what I'm about to say, I would have picked up in my 6 years in Jamshedpur,
Right.
apart from my own guess at what Jamshedji was like. To me, he seemed to be a person of extraordinary vision and a great nationalistic spirit. He was able to foresee independent India, which it was not at that time, but a manufacture of goods and services, more fundamental goods and services, basic goods and services. And if it existed on imports, he set himself the task of why could it not be done by us?
Right.
So the first industry he established was textiles in Nagpur,
Yes.
where I'm told the British talked of Lancashire having the ideal climatic conditions to spin cotton into yarn.
Yes.
So he picked Nagpur because it had the same moisture content as Lancashire did.
Yes.
So there was, an element of analysis and an element of purpose in this. He added India's first atomized moisture in the plant. There were spray of water that provided the correct moisture content, and he produced the first textile mill. It was also the first company to have public shareholding.
Right.
So he did this. Then that didn't fulfill his quest for establishing industry.
Right.
I think the next one he did was either steel or hotels.
Yes.
In the case of steel, I think that's very well documented. He
Yes.
produced a steel plant which the British thought could never be done.
Right.
And he did it.
Yes.
He picked, I believe he went on horseback and elephant to find the confluence of iron ore,
and
coal, water,
Yes.
and built the plant in Jamshedpur.
Yes. He did a lot of study in U.S. and in Britain.
Yeah,
And amazing amount of research.
he went to the U.S. to pick a consultant who would
Yes.
come and run the plant.
Yes.
The plant was Indian, the thinking was Indian, but he didn't produce a second-class plant. He produced a world-class plant in those days.
Best equipment. Yes.
And he had the foresight to buy about 25 square miles of land, which became the city of Jamshedpur.
Right. Sakchi was the name of the city before.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Then, in terms of power,
Yes.
he foresaw that the hills around Bombay would provide a
Hydroelectric.
head of water for a hydel project.
Yes.
So the next one, the next early one was Tata Electric Companies,
Yes.
which had the hydel power at a time when no other similar power existed.
Yes.
The hotels, as you may know, is a funny story of his.
Yes.
He was the largest landowner in Bombay. The British put a ban on his owning any more land. So he owned the Royal Bombay Yacht Club. And he was taken for lunch there by one of his British friends, but not allowed entry into the place because he was not fair-skinned.
Right.
And he was incensed by that because he owned the building. So he decided that he would build a hotel that was open to everyone,
Right.
which is how the Taj came to be.
Right. Right.
And all these industries are not the normal consumer industries or manufacturing industries. They are the backbone of a country. Steel,
Right.
textiles, power,
Right.
and accommodation.
So, in terms of his thinking, when he visited England and he studied liberal thinkers, Ruskin,
Yes.
people like those, and so he developed his thinking for enlightened capitalism and constructive philanthropy based on his liberal upbringing or thinking in England. Is that true?
I guess it was. I don't know, except he was, just like I mentioned, a person who believed in the equity in dealing with your fellow man.
Yes.
He intuitively trusted people. He respected merit, tremendous respect for merit. Not family or unions of other sort. He respected a capable person when he saw him and allowed him to operate. There are many stories about him traveling on trains and seeing somebody or talking to somebody that he felt had merit and inviting him to come and work for him.
Right. Right.
So I guess if he had lived on, we would have had more basic industries.
Right.
but his two sons finished those projects for him,
Exactly.
and they never got to see them completed.
Exactly. So one aspect that I read about was his love for education. And the love for education, and also making sure that a nation is built based on education and scientific research and scientific studies.
Yeah.
And that is also one of the basis for his dream for the advanced scientific institution like the Indian Institute of Science
Yes.
in Bangalore,
Yeah.
which he did not complete, but as you mentioned,
Yeah.
his sons completed.
Yes, another example of a nation building of foundation in scientific education, the Indian Institute of Science, at a time when India had never really dreamed of being in a part of the scientific world,
Right.
was again as far-sighted and as visionary as you could be in those days.
Exactly. So, of course, going forward on Indian Institute of Science, it has been such a place where the distinguished names that have been associated with it, Sir Visvesvaraya, Nobel Laureate, Dr. C.V. Raman, Dr. Homi Bhabha, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, and Dr. Satish Dhawan. This is, of course, going forward, but it laid the basis for education and creating people like that,
Yes.
which was really amazing. And again, this goes back to the linkage of nation building and how India's industrialization. And he was also a true nationalist in that he cared about the future enough that he was, it was said that he attended the first meeting of the Indian National Congress with Dadabhai Naoroji.
Yeah.
He was a friend of his. So a lot of nation, feeling for the nation as a whole, future nation.
Yes, between him and Sir Ratan Tata, there was a lot of early support, financial support and otherwise of Mahatma Gandhi and some of the early stalwarts.
Gokhale, Mr. Gokhale. Yes.
Gokhale, and great support for an independent India.
Yes.
Not openly so, but nevertheless, the home we were brought up with had a lot of pictures of Mahatma Gandhi who stayed at their London house for some time, etc.
Of course, he sadly passed away in 1904 at Bad Neuheim in Germany.
Yeah.
And once Jawaharlal Nehru once wrote about him, said that when you have to give the lead in action, in ideas, the lead which does not fit in with the very climate of opinion, that is true courage. And that it is the type of courage and vision that Jamsetji Tata showed. That shows the giant of a man.
Yes, the softer option was never to do these things because they all came from the UK.
Right.
So why do it? And he had this nationalistic spirit that we could do it and we must do it. And much later, over 100 years later, we became exporters to the UK.
Right.
So, he, in a manner of speaking, was way ahead of his time.
Yes, exactly. So after Jamsetji, Dorabji became chairman of Tata Sons and worked hard to fulfill the great plans of his father,
Yes.
as you mentioned. And 3 months before Sir Dorabji's death in 1932, he created two trusts, Sir Dorabji Tata Trust and the Lady Tata Memorial Trust, who passed away before him.
Yes.
And he bequeathed all his wealth to his trust, which enabled India with its premier institutions like the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Tata Memorial Hospital for Cancer, Tata Institute for Fundamental Research, and the National Center for the Performing Arts. These are premier institutions for the country.
Yeah, that is true.
After Sadhuraji, Sadnaroji Saklatwala became chairman, and he actually did some financial consolidation of several Tata companies, enabling future growth of the group. This is what I read.
Yeah.
And he passed away in 1938, and then JRD succeeded him as the fourth chairman. And so we can spend some time on JRD,
Okay.
Another giant of a man. Jamsetji's cousin, Mr. R.D. Tata, director of Tata & Sons, had moved to Paris and set up business there. He married Suzanne Bruyere, a French lady. And their eldest son, JRD, was born in 1904. And he grew up and was educated in France. And then, of course, there is a lot of thing that we can talk about, but tell me about your perspective on what you know about JRD's early life.
Well, I really, if I go back, my earliest recollections of Jay were, Jay is as we all loved him and called him.
Yes.
My earliest exposure to him was relatively unfriendly.
Ah, I see.
I mentioned I was in college in the States, and often we used to run into each other when he visited the Tata offices in New York, in New York City. And he was very, I would say not even cool, he was very cold, and you felt you were interfering in his busy schedule, and he let you know that that was the case.
I see.
So it was more, how are you, what you're doing. He'd ask the same question each time. How long have you been here? Why did you come to the US? Just very perfunctory sort of conversation.
I see.
It was in Jamshedpur during the 6 years that I was there that we started to get to know each other when he came. We shared a common passion that we both were pilots.
Right.
And I would say the fact that we both had a love for flying and aviation that just transformed somebody who was here into somebody very close to him.
Right.
And he asked me to, I look upon it as a test. He asked me to start a flying club in Jamshedpur.
Nice.
And my first exposure to an entrepreneurial exercise of raising money, of going to Hindustan Aeronautics to buy the first plane, getting government accreditation to operate a flying club, and then telling him it's done. And then we became closer and closer. One day he appointed me as the chairman of Tata Industries, and a few years later, a director of Tata Sons.
So, talking about his love of aviation, of course, that showed up in his starting the Tata flying institutions like later on Air India.
Yes.
And his love for flying, as you said. So you mentioned that you also had love for flying. Was it through JRD or was it an independent?
No, it was purely independent.
I see.
And it just became a common bond between us two.
Right. So did you also learn flying in Bombay, or was it?
Yes, I learned flying in Bombay, but was too young to solo. I was 14 years old, and I had to stop.
Nice.
Then when I went to Cornell, I started flying again.
Okay.
The legal age to get a license was 17, and on my 17th birthday, I soloed,
Right.
and I've been flying ever since.
Right. Right. Interesting. So in 1938, Sir Nauroji suddenly passed away, and all other directors senior to him elected JRD at the age of 34 as the chairman of Tata Sons, making him head of the largest Indian group at that time.
Yeah.
And of course, that was unusual, in those days for a young person like that.
Yes.
And then, of course, he stamped his style of working on the organization by democratizing the working of Tatas, by changing the common chairmanship model, for example. And at that time, as you mentioned, in 1945, a wholly owned subsidiary of Tata Sons called Tata Industries was set up. He later on made you chairman, but this was set up in 1945, is what I read. And this was set up to increase professionalism in the management of the companies. Also, articles of association of the leading Tata companies were amended to make social responsibility beyond the welfare of employees part of their objectives. And that was, again, his emphasis in TISCO, in Jamshedpur, to make sure that you take care of not only your employees but also the town, for the city.
Yeah. May I just add something
Yes.
there? If one were to go around Jamshedpur, you would understand the significance of what JRD did. You had this island of wealth. I say wealth because the workers had wealth. They had company housing. They lived a much better life than the villagers around the plant. And by being sensitive to the upbringing of those villagers, by giving them education, by giving them medical assistance, by creating industries, for example, stitching uniforms for the factory, lunches, making food, giving the women livelihood.
Right.
He created a situation where Jamshedpur, as against some other industry towns, has no rancor between the villagers and the wealthy worker of the industry, but a oneness which is quite noticeable in Bihar or Jharkhand today.
Right.
The different term of what it is in Bihar or Jharkhand of today, and built on cooperation and coexistence, which came from and was the start of CSR, social responsibility by industry.
Right.
To try and find water, to try and increase crops and such. So the island spread.
Yes.
In terms of width. It's very significant and not so easily determinable in print, if you might.
Right.
Unless you go there.
Right. Actually, it so happened I was born in Bihar. I was born in Jharia.
Oh, I see.
And my father worked for Indian Iron and Steel Company.
Okay.
So I grew up in a household which was, again, an island. It was a British-built.
Biman Mukherjee's.
Yeah, right. So my father knew him.
Yeah.
But the thing that you mentioned, the disparity between affluence and the villagers, I saw that as a child.
Yeah.
So very much so, yes.
Did you lived in Burnpur then, or?
No, we were in Jitpur. That was the name of the colliery.
I see.
And because there were no good schools, my brother and sister, we lived in Amritsar.
Oh, I
with our
see.
grandparents. So
I
we had
see.
a reverse commute. We would go to
I see.
Jitpur during the summer vacations.
I see.
And so there are many stories I could tell you. But I very much appreciate Jamshedpur. I have met many people. There's a gentleman that I know in the Bay Area whose dad actually was one of the foremen in Jamshedpur. And when you were doing your work in the beginning after Cornell,
Yeah.
you worked for him.
Yeah, I was on the shop floor for about 3
Yes.
years.
His name was Arun Bose.
Who?
Arun Bose was his name. You
Yeah.
may not recall. And his son's name is Ajoy Bose,
Uh-huh.
he was at Bell Labs, and he talked to you because Arun Bose told you that please talk to my son. He wants to go abroad, and you advised him
I
on
see.
going to college. So this is, of course, many years ago. So in 1970, the government imposed MRTP, the Monopolies Restrictive Practices Act, mandating the group to enforce a loose federal type of management of the company. And Tata Sun Industries directors in charge of various companies were withdrawn, and the autonomous boards rules the company. This really changed the nature of Tata
Yes.
operations. And it was purely JRD's talent, energy, charisma, and vision that drove the companies to achieve great results, in spite of the autonomous nature of the structure. Because, of course, it created people that became powerful bosses of individual companies. But it was JRD's talent that kept it together.
Yeah.
Would you believe? Would you think?
Oh, yes, I do. I credit him with creating the group that became the nucleus of a bigger group later. And had he not done that, it would have disintegrated into discrete companies.
Right.
We owned very little of those companies. I think when I took over, we had about 4 or 8% ownership in Tata Steel. And our ownership in each of the major companies was very small.
Yes.
And it was JRD's persona and the confidence the shareholders had in him that created at that time a virtual group, but not a group, because we had no major shareholding or legal binding on us. And one had to make those changes after JRD because
Right.
one didn't have his
Right.
charisma and have a chance to do it on the basis of non-ownership.
Yes. Yes. So, and his achievements were remarkable given the Tata Group operated under wage and price control, high import duties, ban on imports, and capital controls. He was able to prevent the nationalization of Tisco, for example.
Yes.
So, quite a remarkable achievement. When he took over, Tata Group had 14 companies with sales of 280 crores. And when he stepped down, sales had increased 30x. And there were 50 large manufacturing companies, not counting innumerable holding, investment, subsidiary, and associate concerns, making it India's biggest business group.
Yeah.
So his achievements are just amazing, especially going through the partition and all these controls and all that.
Actually, his contribution is really remarkable because of MRTP. We never received a license to enter a new business or to grow in a business.
Yes.
And despite that, we grew to the extent we had. And most importantly, we grew without succumbing to corruption,
Yes.
to bribery, to payouts.
Yes.
None of those props were our content or our DNA.
Yes.
So he set new moral standards for India, certainly for us to follow. And we've been doing our best to follow them continuously since then.
Yes, I know that the Indian government, I mean, Jawaharlal Nehru respected him. And of course, he was conferred the highest civilian award, the
Yeah.
Bharat Ratna. So he more than deserved it. I mean, what a figure. And as an internationalist, JRD became widely known and admired outside India.
Yes.
He was, of course, a true internationalist, as he was the chairman of Air India, which led to his serving a term as chairman of the IATA, International Air Transport Authority. And he served as a consultant to the Nobel Foundation in Sweden, along with Nobel laureate Dr. Linus Pauling. Of course, as during the dusk of his career, some of those structures in the companies started to impinge on the performance of the company, of the Tata Group as a whole. And at some point it seemed like there was a possibility that the Tata Group may dissolve into separate companies. Is there something you'd like to comment on that?
No, that phenomena has re-emerged many times. When you have CEOs of those companies who suddenly feel that they could move out and become bigger fish in a pond. And when I got involved, Jay was already a more elderly person and given to looking at soft options more often than he did when he was younger, which is a natural aging phenomena. And he would allow this to take place, and he and I would disagree on whether that should be, whether let's say a Tata Chemicals or a Tata Power should be its own company and not be governed by Tata Sons.
Right.
So it has happened through the years. Tata Steel tried to, Rusi Modi of Tata Steel tried to take it away from central control, and when Jay realized that, he brought everything back into focus. But that phenomenon has happened on more than one occasion.
Right. But MRTP also restricted his options. Is that true?
Well, MRTP actually if you were considered to be an MRTP company, you couldn't grow without the permission of the government. You were restricted in what you did. So the aim was to stay out of MRTP. And that was one of the phenomena that was in favor of carving companies out, because they ceased to be MRTP companies and were freer to grow, etc.
I see.
That was the rationale many a times for taking it away.
Right. So, in any case, in 1991, he decided to step down and propose that you become chairman of Tata Sons. And we'll come back to that a little bit more. And so now I think, unless you have some other comments, we want to start with your career, and truly starting from your days in US when you went to Cornell.
Yeah.
By the way, my son just did his PhD at Cornell.
I see.
In biology and ornithology. And now he's doing his postdoc.
At Cornell?
At Cornell.
I see.
Yeah. So you graduated with a BS degree in architecture and structural engineering from Cornell in 1962, and as you mentioned, you worked in the US briefly in Los Angeles. And you returned to India in 1962 at the urging of your grandmother, Lady Ratan Tata. and then you trained on the shop floor of Tisco, as you mentioned. Then you were, so maybe you can take it from there, and we can talk a little bit about your work as a director at Nelco and other places.
Okay.
And if you want to add anything else,
All right.
please do.
I actually came back with with a letter of appointment to IBM.
I see.
And so I came back to India and actually worked for IBM for about 15 days.
Okay.
Till Jayadi telephoned me and he said, "You can't work for IBM. If you're here, you must work in Tata." So you couldn't say no
Right.
to him, and so I remember using IBM's electric typewriters because they were neat in those days,
Right.
and did the resume that Jayadi wanted from me to give to him to process my employment.
Right.
I was then shipped out to Jamshedpur on the shop floor in telco, not in steel.
Okay.
So I was involved in looking at the never really a meaningful assignment, but a tremendous learning experience. So I was placed in the automotive plant for trucks,
I see.
and then a year later I was moved to Tisco.
So at that time, Telco had already been acquired from Eastern Railways, and
Yes,
locomotives had been
they were
stopped.
still making steam
Okay.
locomotives, but the jewel was the new Tata Mercedes-Benz
Of course. Right.
truck plant.
Right.
And headed by Germans at that time.
Yes.
And but probably right now, if you look at the manufacturing facilities at that time, they were very, very Spartan. But for the day, it was a state-of-the-art truck plant in the pride of India, if you might.
Of course.
So I worked on the shop floor of Tata Steel, and then moved to the project office and went through several assignments in Tata Steel until I became the technical assistant to the managing director, Mr. Nanavati.
Of course.
And then I was called back to the head office in Bombay.
I see.
That time Mr. Mulgaonkar was the vice chairman of Tata Steel.
Yes.
And I then was asked to go to Australia to do a joint venture, which I did. I was there for 6 or 7 months in Sydney. And came back and was asked to go back to Jamshedpur, which I refused.
I see.
That changed my career a little bit. I joined a fledgling company called TCS at that time, which was involved, this was in 71, was involved in, TCS's work was to get paper documents from US corporations, convert them to punch key, to punch cards,
Right.
and ship the cards back, because at that time information technology was moving away from paper bills and paper documents to punch cards. And
Right.
IBM had these machines that would run through punch cards and print them out. So
I didn't realize you worked for TCS.
6
Because-
months or so.
Because I was going to, in fact, spend some time on TCS. This is a consultancy service.
Yes.
But it started off as Tata Computer Center with Lalit Kanodia
Yes.
and so.
I was there in Kanodia's time.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just that time that.
Yes.
Okay. Because they had just come from MIT.
That's right. There's,
And there were two other gentlemen, but in any case, that's very interesting that you were there during the time of the data
yeah,
processing.
Kohli was the chief.
He later, right?
No, Kanodia worked under Kohli.
Sure.
And Kohli was the chief. There was another person called Ashok Malhotra,
Yes.
who then went to MIT.
Yes.
And so it was we occupied one floor of Nirmal building.
I see.
And the business was very, very small. Computers were banned, no, they were banned a little later.
Yes. Yes.
But
And I believe it was a 1401, IBM 1401.
That's right.
You were using.
That's right.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So because I wanted to, since I am representing the Computer History Museum, I wanted to spend some time on what the computing part of things. And I remember reading that Dr. Homi Bhabha actually had some correspondence with John von Neumann. Von Neumann. He's the
von Neumann. Yeah.
His architecture is really the computer architecture,
yeah.
the standard architecture. And those were the early days. And he wanted to, in fact, in 1948, he communicated with John von Neumann about possibilities of computing, and Mr. R.N. Narasimha in 1955 worked on the first indigenously designed computer based on logic diagrams from University of Illinois computer project, which was called the TIFRAC
Okay. Yeah.
by P.M. Nehru in 1962. But because of the cost and commitment, and it's a fast-moving world, it was not a serious commitment.
Yeah.
And so then coming to the Lalit Kanodia, MIT graduate, that was in 1965. He got a.
I was there in 71.
Okay. So he was actually, it was very interesting that he was here, he came from MIT to get married. And he was in Bombay waiting to get married. And he had to wait for 6 months apparently. So he got a consulting position with the Tatas with Rustam Choksi.
Okay.
And then in that process, he got an opportunity to start a computer operation, data processing for the Tata businesses.
Then what I described was data processing.
Exactly. So Nitin Patel and Ashok Malhotra joined him.
Okay.
They worked with him at the MIT Mac project, which was really about data processing, not so much of design of computers.
Right.
Because he was, I think, a mechanical engineer. He did his mechanical engineering from IIT Bombay. So, in terms of, as we were talking about the TCS, origins of TCS, a time when Nitin Patel and Ashok Malhotra joined him, they used to work with him, with Lalit Kanodia at MIT. So they then operated like an American management consulting company with the 1401, IBM 1401. And they gave seminars like electronic data processing and the management revolution. Yeah. So it became more of a seminar and thing, so it didn't really take off so much. It was only in 1968 it became TCS with a new strategy and with consultants to find application for the Tata companies. This is what I read.
Okay.
But of course, it ran into some anti-automation kind of forces, like LIC, the Life Insurance Corporation. They said we'll lose jobs if you automate a lot of the data processing. And I understand that your dad, Mr. Naval Tata, he was a long-time representative to ILO. He published in 1968 a brochure called Automation, Blessing or Curse.
Yeah.
And in fact, he defended the use of computers
Yeah.
in that. And so we can come back to TCS
Okay.
later, but that's
Okay.
very interesting that you actually worked there for some time. So talking about, I think you were, please continue with your assignments, like you were talking about besides TCS.
I was in TCS for about 6 months.
Right.
And I was enticed to, I was told that Tatas are going to go into the manufacture of color television sets. And I was offered a position in that new company.
I see.
It was supposed to be in collaboration with Grundig of Germany. It was a joke because I went to Grundig 2 or 3 times, but I don't think there was ever a serious effort to form that company because nothing happened. So I moved away from that, and there was a small electronic company in the group, Nelco,
Yes.
which no one wanted. It was making losses greater than its capital. And I took that because I was a little fed up with the group, and I thought I had nothing to lose by trying to turn Nelco around. If I didn't succeed, I could always go back to the States.
Right.
And I was sort of at that inflection point.
Sure.
I learned a lot from Nelco because it was a company really in trouble. It produced radios. The time the industry was changing from valve radios to
Transistor.
semiconductor radios. And the management of Nelco had decided that transistorized radios were a toy, and so they remained with valve, and
I see.
the market just left them. They had about 80-90% of the market, and then they ended up with 2%,
Wow.
which is about the time I came into the picture. And we revamped. There was a person, Tata Power principally owned Nelco, and there was a person called KPP Nambia, who was the head of R&D, and together we designed a whole range of transistorized radios to be relevant in the market. And eventually we ended up with about a 20% share of the radio market.
I see.
I was in Nelco we diversified into calculators and mini computers. We produced a mini computer with a California mini computer company. I can't remember its name. And we produced that, we marketed that. We went into drives and inverter systems, industrial electronics basically. And I was in Nelco for about 10 years. We became a profitable company. Not as profitable as we should have been, and
Right.
but profitable. We wiped out all the losses, etc.
You also had some labor trouble there, some union strikes.
Yes, I I said it was a learning experience. We, for the first few years, would not know every month whether we could make the payroll. And you had, the best way to learn how to survive is to do it in adversary
Of course.
conditions. And then I had a labor problem with the Shiv Sena union, with Mr. Bal Thackeray. We had a lockout. We produced inverter systems and drive systems in flats apartments that we rented so that we could meet customers' schedules.
Right.
It was a wonderful learning experience. And somewhere in that period of 10 years, Jayadi called me and said, "I'd like you to be a director on Tata Sons."
Okay. So I understand you also went to Harvard in 1975 for the
Yeah.
advanced business school management course. Was that during that same time?
Yes.
I see.
I needed a break at
Sure.
that point in time, and it was a 13-week course. So I just decided I would do it.
Wonderful. And also, I guess you were assigned to Empress Mills for some time.
Yes, I kept getting the troubled companies one after the other, which, like I said, the Flying Club was a test. I think these were also tests.
I see.
So
Right. So in 1978, you had been thinking about the activities at Tata, and you sent some confidential notes to Jay on 2 occasions, proposing changes in the strategic plans and operations of the Tata Group. Do you recall?
yeah, I sat down and actually in the 70s probably just notes, but in 1982 my mother was suffering from cancer and was
Yes.
in Sloan Kettering,
Right.
and I had taken a leave of absence to be with her.
Yes.
So I found myself sitting in the visitor's room for 4 months in Sloan Kettering, and I sat and wrote out a strategic plan for
Right.
Tatas, which I presented when I returned,
Right.
and it was rejected.
I see.
So I picked the part that I could do, and it was basically to enter the high technology areas.
Yes.
And it carved out a plan basically to go into areas which were disallowed for the private sector at that time.
Right. So in terms of your chairmanship for Tata Industries, that happened before
That happened in 81.
Yes. And you were made chairman of Tata
And
Industries.
that's the part I took to implement.
Yes. Right.
And then in 84, Rajiv Gandhi became the prime minister.
Yes.
And it was as though he had read my strategic plan, because he opened up those areas which were earlier closed.
Right.
And suddenly I found myself in a position to implement those plans. So we formed a joint venture with IBM. We brought the IBM desktop and mini and mainframes to India again. IBM was thrown out of India, if you
Yes.
recall.
Yes. Yes. My brother was with them here. When thrown out, he went back to
I
US.
see. Okay.
Yes.
And so we formed a joint venture called Tata IBM.
Right.
we formed a joint venture and we entered the process control business with Honeywell.
Yes.
We went into contract oil drilling with Schlumberger.
I see. So these are the companies that were mentioned: Tata Honeywell, Tata Telecom, High Tech Drilling System, Keltron Telephone, Tata Finance, Matrix Materials.
Keltron was not our company.
I see.
Keltron was what KPP Namibia went
I
and
see.
formed
Okay.
with the Kerala state government.
Right.
But yes, we formed several companies who went into financial services,
Right.
and I think 13 or 14 new companies, mainly in the high-tech areas.
Yes. And the Tata Elxsi as well at that time.
Tata Industries existed.
Tata Elxsi.
Tata Elxsi, which happened with Tempe.
Tempe, yes. Right. So was that around the same time?
Yes, all in that same period. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And so Tata Industries had small holdings, only 10 to 20% in each.
Because it was a shell company virtually.
Yes.
So it would turn to the major Tata companies to invest in these new businesses.
Yes.
And it's the major Tata companies that earn the most money from this. Tata Industries never did, but it fostered those businesses into.
Exactly. And then in 1988, I think you took over chairmanship of Telco
Yes,
from Sumant Mulgaonkar.
that's right.
And in March 1991, when JRD stepped down as chairman, he proposed your name, and he called it. And the reason he gave was that you are like him, and you have memory like him. There are two things that I read, because you were again, you were taking over when there were many other senior people.
Yeah. Well, by that time I was very close to him, and he was more like a foster father to me. And my real father was my father at home,
Yes.
but at work, Jay was like my father
Yes.
to a great extent. And we spent more time together than I did with my father at work. And we interacted much, much more every day at work than I did with my father.
Yes.
And he was my father at home when I came home, but
Yes.
so
Yeah, I remember when he was not well, and how I used to visit him and give him updates.
who? Jay?
JRD, yes.
Jay, yes, to some extent, but he left India to take a winter break and fell ill and went into the hospital and never came back. Mr. Mulgaonkar was the one who was ill for a long period of time. We used to go every other day to brief him on things and get his views and his inputs.
I see. Okay. And in 1991, right after, very closely after you were made chairman, Dr. Manmohan Singh scrapped many of the MRTP provisions.
Yes.
So the true liberalization started
Yes.
around that time, which was very good,
Yeah.
coinciding.
And what happened was that we rejoiced at that time and went forward in growing. And certain parts of the business community went into trying to continue to have protectionism. And we just shot ahead because they were all busy in the powers of the corridors of Delhi trying to block opening up. And while the government was committed to that, we were able to get joint venture agreements done, and go and forge into areas that they missed.
Yes. So one of your first tasks was to rebuild the linkage between Tata Sons and the other companies of the group.
That's right.
And of course, you had to deal with strong individuals,
Yes.
Rusi Modi, Darbari Seth, and Ajit Kerkar, and Nani Palkiwala.
Yes.
But you also, instituted retirement age and so on, so that.
Yeah, that made me very unpopular. Later, I abided by my own retirement age
Right.
because it would have been wrong not to.
Yes, yes. And I think your original, in a way, you updated the original strategic plan
Yeah.
that you had proposed, and the thrust was on technology-driven leadership.
Yes.
And you brought in McKinsey to help with reorganizing the
Yeah.
company, where there were overlapping businesses and so on. Which is, and of course, the other thing I read about was the brand Tata, that you brought in a common brand for all the companies.
Yeah, I'd like to talk on that a
Sure.
minute. We represented, the Tata Group represented itself in about 30 different ways at that time. Tata Chemicals had one logo, Tata Oil Mills had another, Tata Iron and Steel Company was something else. Telco was Tata Engineering and Locomotive Company. Each one had its own logo, its own identity. And yet we used to go and say we're the Tata Group. So we standardized on a particular logo and a certain graphic discipline, letterheads. We changed the names of many companies. Tata Iron and Steel Company became Tata Steel. Telco became Tata Motors. Tata Chemicals was whatever it was renamed Tata Chemicals. And we got that sort of order in place. We created a logo which was across the board. And we created an agreement that said so long as you use the Tata name, etc., you abided by the following values and business practices. And if you failed to do that, we had the right to remove the name.
Yes.
So that was an attempt to identify the group as a group and to create synergy. A tremendous opposition to that when we started, but I think later they started to feel the benefits of that.
Yes, yes. The other aspect that you emphasized was going abroad, to start going abroad, to start investing internationally. And that's where your emphasis on, as you mentioned, both on computers.
Yeah, we made one, which I think you're referring to, one major change. Hitherto, Tatas had never grown inorganically. They had always grown themselves.
Right.
And we said that we should be open to inorganic growth, to making acquisitions or mergers,
Right.
which at that point in time was very significant because we bought Chorus, which is old British Steel, and we bought Jaguar and Land Rover.
Right. So that has really paid dividends in terms of growth.
But Jaguar Land Rover has paid dividends. Chorus has been the steel industry has been in the doldrums in Europe.
Yes, yes. It's a challenge, yes.
Yeah.
So in terms of the performance, overall performance of the group, you certainly proved your detractors wrong, and you outperformed Jay. By the time you retired, Tata Group at more than $100 billion was the largest Indian multinational conglomerates, with larger than 65% of income from overseas, and about 100 operating companies spread across 56 countries. 6 continents. You had spent close to $18 billion on acquiring 22 companies worldwide, as you mentioned, Tetley, Chorus, Jaguar, Land Rover, and the hotels, New York's Pierre Hotel. And it has an excellent track record. Also, innovation. The company was was actually the 6th best innovative company in the world by Business Week in 2008, ahead of IBM and Sony and Nokia. There's a lot of innovation that happened in the company. And of course, as I mentioned in the introduction, you have been awarded numerous prestigious awards and recognized for your work and achievements. Just amazing history.
Well, I think it's been a very exciting journey because India changed from a very protected, inward-looking economy to embracing the world, wanting to be recognized. In many ways, all the things that JRD stood for and shouted for from the rooftops happen.
Yes.
And India emerged from an economic disaster country to one that has had a very high growth rate.
Yes.
Which I think we all should recognize what the government did in the 1984 period.
Yes, right. So going back to some of the high-tech emphasis that you brought into being, history of computers in India and the semiconductor technology, for example, it has been fairly sparse, meaning the design and manufacture of computers and manufacturing of semiconductors. I think there was Bharat Electronics was one of the early people. But in terms of computers, because it's so fast moving and the investment requires it's very, very steep, was that a deliberate action to stay out of computers as such?
No, we entered the computer area with IBM.
But was that a joint manufacturing?
Yes.
Okay.
And why we broke up was IBM decided that, in Armonk, decided that this was the only joint venture they had, and they wanted to split it into, Lou Gerstner just joined.
I see.
And they wanted to split it into a software company which IBM would own.
Right.
And a hardware company that Tatas would own.
I see.
And at that time there was starting to be a realization that computer manufacture was a dud business, and the money was in services.
Right.
So we sold out the whole thing to IBM instead at a very good price. But we didn't go into manufacture. We did produce, I remember the name of the company, Quantel was the name of the company.
I see.
Producing mini computers.
Okay.
Sort of this high.
I see.
And then we went into Alexi, which was something that was not part of we owned about 50% of Alexi, which was a company that was a multiprocessor.
Right.
It shot up in sales in the first 2 or 3 years, and NSA had about 6 of our machines. Each of the aircraft companies had a machine or 2 of Alexi. And then suddenly vector computers came on the market, and the market disappeared
I see.
for Alexei virtually overnight.
Right. Right.
And we lost everything we had at that time, but we probably were the only Indian company that actually took the risk to go into a multiprocessor to fight VAX,
Right.
which was the DEC
Yes.
gold standard at that time.
Yes. Yes. That's how the Sun Microsystem came into being.
Sorry?
Sun Microsystems.
Yes.
They were
yeah,
the competitor.
Yeah.
Yes. So, in terms of components of manufacturing of the computers, semiconductors were not invested in. You would acquire components from outside, or
For the Alexei?
yes,
Yeah, we bought all our computers, semiconductors from Motorola.
Motorola. Yes, okay. Because that is another very high capital kind
See,
of business.
the government of India did some wrong things at that time. They threw out IBM, and they decided that the only computer that would be manufactured in India would be by ECIL,
Right.
which is a government company, and that all the semiconductors would be produced by the Semiconductor Corporation of India.
Right.
They banned the import of semiconductors. So LSIs, and they came into being, etc., were not allowed for use. And the semiconductor investment in the country was in of the older generation, and not submicron at all.
Yes.
And there's no market. They were just behind their times.
Yes, yes.
So until we brought IBM back in with the joint venture,
Yes.
there used to only be ECIL and the British company, British Computer, I forget, ICL.
Yes.
That were the two companies that existed.
Yes. Right. So anyway, so that's a lost opportunity, but now it is extremely expensive to be in the semiconductor business. In fact, most companies have gotten out of manufacturing.
Well, I always thought that what India needed to do is invest in a good semiconductor company. We obviously couldn't have any place in Intel, but in the smaller companies which had their own fab facilities.
Yes.
But we have not done that.
Right. And it has become so prohibitive now that even in the United States,
it's better to buy off-the-shelf semiconductors.
Yes, yes.
Right. And the key lies in the ingenuity of circuit design, and not necessarily the going back to silicon and trying to be self-sufficient.
Exactly. The hardware has become very commoditized.
That's right.
And so it's really the software world.
That's
now.
right.
And so I wanted to come back to that when we talk about that. But before that, anything else about your career that you want to talk about? Because I want to then go to the section on the values, Tata values and the guiding principles.
I think I've covered most of what I could think about.
So in terms of Tata values and guiding principles, starting from Jamshedji and the DNA that exists even today, I read, like you had emphasized in your some of your writings, that integrity, understanding, excellence, unity, responsibility, those are some key values. Would you like to comment on that?
I can't comment too much on them because they've been away from
Sure.
the thing for some time. But basically, it was to protect the image that we had, to make it real and living, that we would be fair to all our stakeholders, to our customers. We would not overpromise and underperform. We would be fair to our employees and our customers, and that we would attempt to be different in terms of not being an example of favoritism, but equality. And we generated a document which is a code of conduct.
Yes.
And we wanted each employee to read it and to sign it. And sign it each year because it got changed marginally depending on what we did. And that we achieved. Strangely enough, we wanted to have all our directors sign that too, and then we had a pushback. Where particularly the outside directors refused to sign our code of conduct, stating that it impinged on the way they would run their company, and so we didn't succeed as well as we should have in creating a code of conduct that we could all say, whether you were a sweeper or a managing director, that you abided by the same
Right.
conditions.
Right. So, but still, the image that Tatas have displayed has always been high integrity and high values and caring for social caring.
That's what we would want to be known
Yes.
for. I think there have been some aberrations from time to time. How we deal with it is our report card, and not the fact that we have a workforce that may not have an errant individual that breaks the code of conduct at some time. But it happens, and how we deal with the situation when it does take place is what we should be gauged on.
So the other aspect that I have read about is a sense of boldness and a spirit of adventure. This is what also over the ages Tata has stood for.
Yes.
And many people like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru have mentioned that. You know, they've always admired when there's a challenge, whether it's a health challenge or a crisis, they would come to Tatas for help or for guidance or a vision.
Yeah, there is a tremendous sense of spirit in the organization that you can mobilize at the time of any crisis, almost on a volunteer basis. So we have a very unique system with an entity called the Tata Relief Committee. Any national calamity, tsunami, earthquake, floods, etc., that happen, this committee gets mobilized by employees, some of them senior employees, who leave their jobs and go and work at that community level for free. And then come back to their normal jobs when it's over. And we have done this, for example, when the tsunami hit Chennai and Kerala. We built some 700 homes for fishermen who'd lost their homes. We have adopted their children, the fishermen who disappeared. We adopted their children and sent them to school and created orphanages for them. All through this committee, what we do is workers and employees give a day's wages. We either match them or give twice that amount or 3 times that amount. That becomes the kitty for that calamity.
Yes.
And then that money is spent by an organization that has been built. When the terrorist attack...
I was going to mention that is exemplary.
Yeah, we formed we didn't form the committee, but we formed a trust to deal with anybody that got hurt or injured or killed.
Right.
And we've sent people to school. Our employees who got killed, we've offered their families the equivalent of their salaries throughout their life as though they were continued to exist.
Yes.
So I think those things are things that make me most proud about what we stand for.
You should be, yes. Another area that, of course, a lot of help has been given is in the area of sports. Tata has, and so that I just wanted to mention that. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. But I wanted to get your view on, we'll come back to philanthropy a little bit, but before that, let's finish on your vision for the future in terms of technology or trust. I know that after you retired, you personally were involved with many startups, but I wanted to get some kind of overview here.
Well, I think the world is changing, and we have companies like TCS which are heavily into information technology. Information technology itself is changing, and we need to be looking at gaining a strong position in analytics, in machine learning, in some of the new technologies which in fact will replace the human inputs of TCS in course of time.
Yes.
And we should not be in the same position as the valves versus transistors that I mentioned.
Yes.
And we should be ahead of the curve, making investments in those areas today.
Yes.
Similarly, we should be looking at issues such as new forms of renewable energy, things we're actually doing in the trusts rather than the companies. I'm suggesting the companies which are generating funds, large funds, should be making investments in these new areas today, and Tatas could be the people that when the dust clears, we're already in that area rather than not being so. And I'm concerned that we perhaps are not doing enough that we're not taking enough risks to enter into new areas. And we are looking more inward again than we have done in the last 15, 20 years.
So that is well said. Thank you so much.
Not at all.
So the one topic I wanted to dwell on was philanthropy, because philanthropy and Tata's, you can't separate them. And all of the time, and I have also read that it was really centered around nation building, and it is not just individual giving or institutions only. But a lot of the fundamentals that were set up in the Institute of Science, in the Help Servants of India Society by Sir Ratan Tata, and then all the institutions that were established, they have spawned other areas where are helping the nation. So just a summary comment from you.
Philanthropy is itself changed. 20, 30, 40 years ago, philanthropy was not a term one used, it was charity. And the charity was oriented towards personal hardship. You had cancer, you came and asked for a grant and we gave you a grant to treat your medical expenses. Or if you lost a leg, an artificial limb would be made available. That's what the trust would do for you. And if you had any personal hardship, you made an application and the trust would consider it, and if it passed their gates, they would assist you. And once in a way, we had a big major project, which might be a cancer hospital or the NCPA or an institute like Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. But they were they were spaced out a lot in time. Today, the trusts are being much more proactive in terms of investing in, for example, a project we do is the elimination of malaria by changing the DNA of the mosquito, or immunotherapy in cancer treatment, or we are doing a project with MIT on low-cost medical devices to make diagnosis and treatment available for the masses. We have started looking at how do we leave a community with a sustainability capability rather than handouts. So we now disperse about $100 million every year in philanthropic issues, which still contain the individual hardship. In fact, we're about 3 or 4 times what we used to be. But the major emphasis is on creating new project for nutrition in the country. We're trying to embed iron to combat anemia in rice and wheat and milk, which should be available to everybody. The state governments will do it. The technology is ours. So we've changed the complexion of what we do in the Trust for Philanthropy. We're getting involved with the bigger part of things. If immunotherapy eventually becomes a way of curing cancer, the next issue that we have to concern ourselves with is how do we get this wonderful new technology to be available to the millions rather than to a handful of rich people who can spend $200,000 or $300,000 on a treatment for themselves. But what about the millions that need it, which will never get it because the founders of the company will become billionaires, a few hospitals will undertake this treatment. And what have we done? We've just made an elitist contribution. So we're trying very hard to see if there is an innovative way that we can bring some of the new, because stem cells and programming DNA and some of the new discoveries are terrific and they can serve mankind, but they will not, because they're only going to be available to the wealthy. And if we can find a way to bring this to the tens of thousands, if not the millions, then I think we could say that we made a difference. So that's where we are in philanthropy.
Okay, thank you so much. That was very thoughtful. I wanted to, first of all, thank you for your time at this time, and I really appreciate this. I think the museum will appreciate it. Mr. John Holler, who's the president of the museum, asked me to personally thank you
Not at
for your
all.
time. And one aspect that I wanted to mention, I read somewhere that there is a place in Pune where you have an archival,
Yes,
and I'm wondering whether we can collaborate with them for any future.
sure,
So I will follow up on that.
sure.
And of course, you have a standing invitation to come to the museum,
All right.
and we'll give you a personal tour of. It's a very fantastic showcase. So the next time you're in the Bay
All right.
Area, we would love to.
I'm in the Bay Area about 4 or 5 times a year,
Okay. So that will be wonderful.
Okay.
Mr.
Thank you.
John Holler will personally. And also there are some very interesting programs which are national level programs, so
Uh-huh.
we will talk to you about that. as well.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
not at all. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks. I enjoyed this.
Thank you.